My name is Anne-Marie Ward. I'm the Heritage Officer with Cavan County Council. I'm here with Bernard from Cavan, and we're very fortunate to have received funding to undertake a study on the invasive species Nuttall'S waterweed. I suppose really when we're looking at this invasive species, we're looking at the damage that it can do to particularly the local tourist industry and the angling, the towns and villages, and they're relying on the anglers to the area. So we're also not only looking at the impact on the biodiversity, but also on the local economies throughout the county. So maybe Bernard, if you just wanted to, I know you had a particularly bad year with the weed and experience in 2022, and maybe if you just want to tell us about that, Bernard, and how it affected your business.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Look, Nuttall pondweed has been a problem with us for a very long time. It's always been in the water for ages. I can't remember even how long it's been in the water. But last year it was especially bad. We had a very good summer. It just promoted the growth exponentially, and truth be told, the whole lake was covered in it. Even this area over here, our dock area over here, as you can see all these boats, we literally had to drag the weed out just to allow our birds to get out.
And in terms of the weed, I don't see it. Is it visible at all today?
Well, you can see it. I mean, it is still here with us. I mean, if you have a look over there, I can just dig my hand in there and you can see it right there.
Oh, so it's quite dense.
Hi, my name is Pádraig McGarty from Cavan Lodge. I operate bringing anglers from overseas and domestically here to fish in the waters in the Lough Oughter catchment. And this is John Cosgrove.
Killashandra. We run stand-up paddleboard tours from the town lake in Killashandra up to Killikeen most of the year round. So we'll be going on to the Lough Oughter area, Lough Oughter lakes and around there as well. So that's where we probably came across this invasive species first.
So the pondweed, as you can see, just a sample of it here in my hand, it grows from the bed of the lake up to the top, and it's really thick and dense. It's almost like an extension of the land. When you look out on an area of the lakes that is affected, it nearly looks like grass or weeds that you could actually walk out on. It's horrendous stuff. It blocks outboard engine motors. Basically, when you go through it, it just cuts off the water going through the engine, and it'll burn out. It also creates dead zones in the lakes where you have an infestation, no light gets down to the bed of the river, therefore there is no life there, and it renders them areas no good for angling anymore.
When we went on paddle tours, we would come off the river and come into a lake that maybe was infested with this species. The fin of the board was catching it, so it meant that people actually couldn't get going. We actually couldn't paddle. We changed our tours, we changed where we started our tours and tried to make areas where this mightn't be growing, but at certain stages last year it was everywhere, and we couldn't avoid it. The biggest problem is, as Pádraig said, is if somebody falls off the stand-up paddleboard, to get themselves back up onto the board, they're actually covered in this stuff. We had a few paddle guides last year, or tours with people, and we actually had to nearly cancel them because it's just heavy, it's dense, it's like a mat, and it's stuck onto people, and they're trying to get themselves back onto boards and kayaks and that. So it's pretty tough.
Tony Dunn is my name, from Cavan Pike Anglers and Lough Oughter Catchment Association. The problem with this weed is ongoing. It is very, very tough to deal with. I myself was a fisherman, and I'm a good fisherman. I know how to get out of trouble. I got stuck in this weed myself during the summer, and I was very, very lucky to get out. I broke an oar, I lost another one, I nearly burned out the engine of the boat. It's only a little small boat, but I was lucky that the wind changed and I was able to get out by myself. But that's just myself. If I wasn't able to do it, I wouldn't have been out there. So there's people out there that's brand new, being let out in kayaks.
It was brought in, we would imagine, by boats from other watercourses, because it's pretty widespread in the country at the moment. And I would imagine small populations were brought in, probably to different areas, and slowly settled on the bottom, to the extent that you wouldn't actually see it, maybe for years. So it could have been here. I have no idea. I'm guessing it could have been here 10 years.
Yeah.
We have a very similar plant, a plant called the curly waterweed, which is similar in ways to this plant. Again, it's a very aggressive, submerged, invasive plant that grows in a manner similar to this, expands in a manner similar to this, and it caused very similar problems in many of the very productive trout fishing bays throughout Corrib. We went in back in 2005 to witness the start of the problem. At that stage, the weed occupied about 5 of the bays, similar to what the lads are explaining here, that the weed was up to the surface, carpeting the lake, and we had a feeling we were looking at the start of a weed explosion. Within 3 years, it had gone from 5 bays to 66 bays. Within 2 more years, it had gone to 166 bays. And at that stage, we reckoned it was gone. We went to Europe because there wasn't sufficient funding to do research and certainly to do management or control. We went to Europe. We were lucky enough to get life funding of about 1.5 million, and we started to do research that will apply to this lake and other lakes with similar weed problems, because I think that's the way you've got to start. You can't decide we're going to take on the whole lake, because certainly you wouldn't have the money for it. Plus, you're not sure it's going to work in a situation such as this. I was talking with you earlier and saying that it's a nutrient-rich lake, that there are nutrients coming in, probably more nutrients than should, be it from diffuse sources, from point sources, you've agriculture, you've other sources of nutrient. It's getting into the lake. I think I heard you, Bernard, saying that there was an algal bloom quite recently, even though the water's getting cold now, indicating that perhaps the water is somewhat eutrophic. The studies indicated that the roots are fairly weak and they're easily damaged. We found another one that we had used elsewhere, and it's paired V-blades. So we've long, heavy blades attached to chains that are drawn behind a boat such as this. And the whole idea is that it is dragged along the bottom, and it's damaging the plant. It's not cutting it. You don't sharpen the blades. The whole idea is to cause as much damage as at all possible. And we found that had a very dramatic impact.
This problem is going to cause and do untold damage to this whole region, which depends whether it's guest house, hotels, new investment such as Cavan, who have put a real statement with a big investment in the area. Bernard said someone comes, has a bad experience. Everyone knows that one bad experience, someone will probably tell 10 people, whereas they only tell 5 if they have a really good experience. I know myself, we've had people here who have got badly stuck in the weed, where maybe wind changed, like Tony said, and actually blew them into it. Well, they were doing all right, and next thing they got into it. And they're on a water bike. They've been briefed, because we have to now. Like, imagine you're going out telling people you have to pull this handle and take, because if this weed gets on, you're not going to be able to move. You have to. Yeah. You have someone then that gets trapped. They're maybe isolated on their own, and it's a very fearful experience. 90% of guys don't know.
It exists.
They know now that there's a weed problem, but they don't get, like, to be fair, look, it's only 3 or 4. I seen this probably back 5, 6, 7 years ago, but it was about 3 years ago where I says, geez, this is a real problem. And that's why I went to Ben that time to identify it, because I wasn't sure was it Canadian pondweed or Nuttall'S. But 90% of boat owners, being fair, they don't know. No. If they knew that they were probably going to damage a pristine lake down the way by not washing their boat, I think they would start to wash their boat and stuff. They would. Yes, that's a problem. When you're going through it, you're spreading it.
The other method was light exclusion. I mean, this is, you know, I've worked with invasive weeds for many, many years, and light exclusion is deemed to be one of the better methods of dealing with these plants. So we came upon a matting material, a jute matting, and perhaps it might block sufficient light to kill the plant. So we started with very small scale trials in Lough Corrib, and the trials were exceptionally successful, way more successful than we thought, because it's an open weave material that will decompose. So that's exactly what the sort of thing we want. But we thought maybe with the open weave, like if you held it up here, you know, you'd get full light through. But where you put it on the water, it saturates, as I said, the weave thickens, so there's less light getting through. But as it sinks to the bottom, the disturbance caused lays a mud carpet on it. And we've used meters to assess the light level getting through, and it's 0. So studies we did there, but this was back in about 2010, revealed that within about 2 months, all of the lagerosyphon, which is a very similar weed to our Nuttall'S pondweed, was gone. It literally had died, as in completely. But what was even more impressive was that the native species for which these lakes are characteristic, you have some very, very fine native species here that are being seriously damaged by the Nuttall'S pondweed, that they started to grow in these locations. There were seeds or spores in the soil that once the invasive species died, these germinated and were able to grow up through these pores. And within 12 months, we dived in some of these trial areas, and it was as though the invasive species wasn't there.
So as a follow-on to the feasibility study, in 2023 we were very happy to receive funding through the local Biodiversity Action Fund to actually promote the whole message about Nuttall'S waterweed, and we thought that the best way as a working group to move it on was to actually concentrate on an education awareness piece, and we're developing signage, and also in terms of making a film that can be put out in local schools, can be put out to communities, to angling groups and that, so it will be for everybody to see and to access and to see that film. Yeah.
And it's such a simple message, the check, clean and dry, because ultimately that's what's going to protect us, stop the spread. There's 3 elements to it. There's the raising awareness piece, and there's protecting the waters that currently aren't impacted, but it's also what we're going to do, managing where it has taken over.
And I think what you're saying, Alison, there as well about the biodiversity data centre, if we can get the anglers to actually feed that information into the biodiversity centre, so we can actually map it, and we know where these invasive species are.
My name is Ben Malone. I work for the Local Authority Waters Programme, or LAWPRO for short, and I cover the counties Cavan, Monaghan and Louth as a community water officer. There are predictions that there's going to be an ever more increasing rate of invasive species colonisation in Ireland on the western front of Europe. It's so important that we increase capacity for people to engage in citizen science and biological recording activities. People are unable to navigate their way through the water system that's colonised by Nuttall'S waterweed. They're unable to cast the line that they want to I suppose, when they want to engage in angling, or they're potentially unable to bathe because there's health and safety risks. It's very real, and there is an economic impact on that. And I suppose communicating that not only within the public space, but within the electorate. So engaging with our councillors and our local representatives to I suppose raise this issue to a higher level, so you can understand what the quality of the water is like that's feeding this complex of lakes here, because there's not one lake or loch in this particular area that is actually meeting its water quality objectives.
Unfortunately, the reason that our water bodies aren't at the status they should be at is because there is an influx, as we just mentioned there, of nutrients into our water bodies, and that's what's causing the algal blooms. That's what's feeding the Nuttall'S waterweed.
One of the most important things to recognise is that it was somebody from the community that I suppose, was the origin of this project.
Absolutely.
It was an observation on the ground
Yeah.
of the presence of Nuttall'S
Yeah.
waterweed and how it was impacting the local economy. And I suppose we heard that and we tried to address it and act on it.
I think that's the beauty of the working group, is that it's a partnership. And if you look at all the recent, strategies and the new draft biodiversity plan that's about to come out on Heritage Ireland 2030, it's all about partnership and working with stakeholders. So it's about getting that buy-in, and I think that's one of the things with the working group, as Ben was saying. You've got the community, you've got the local business, you've got the council, Law Pro, National Parks and Wildlife Service, and we're all working together. And
Absolutely.
ultimately, we're all custodians of our waterways, and that's what
Absolutely.
we want to protect,
and
manage.
I suppose what would be nice to develop on the back of our efforts to date would be those management trials on Nuttall'S waterweed and how we can potentially maintain navigable stretches within this catchment that can, I suppose, aid and facilitate a prosperous local economy.
Thank you.